This is a guided meditation on peace, presentness, and political revolution. Find a place where you can sit comfortably, perhaps resting your hands on your knees. You may wish to sit on the floor with your legs crossed, or if you're not too tired, you may like to lie down on your back. Whatever position suits you. Make sure that your chest is open, and you may wish to allow your eyes to gently close, or find a point in the room where you can rest your focus. Begin by noticing your breathing. Feel your chest rising and falling, your belly expanding in and out. You don't have to change the way you breathe, just becoming aware of it, in and out. Notice also that society can be thought of as being made up of groups of people with conflicting and irreconcilable economic interests, which we call classes. You don't have to change society in this moment. This is your moment, your time. Just notice class conflict and be aware of it. This will be our anchor as we proceed on this journey. And now, let's take 3 deep, relaxing breaths. As you release the air in your lungs, you may wish to repeat in your mind the topics of today's meditation, and with each breath, I invite you to experience a doubling of your relaxation. Let's take the first of these 3 breaths now. Breathing in peace and out. Very good. Breathing normally in between, becoming even more relaxed with each breath. Let's take the second breath now. In presentness and release. Fantastic job. Aware of your chest rising and falling. Let's take the third and final breath now. Breathing in political revolution and out. Well done. Don't worry if your breathing doesn't match the sound of my voice. It is all good, and it is all okay. Just becoming even more aware of breath, and beginning slowly to relax. As we breathed those 3 relaxing breaths, you may have noticed a slight tingling sensation spreading from the top of your head down through your shoulders, arms, chest, right out the tips of your toes. This sensation is available to you throughout this meditation whenever you desire. but just invite yourself to come back to breath and the model of class conflict. Breathing in and out. As you sink deeper and deeper into this relaxed state of awareness, you may begin to notice the position of your body, the surfaces you are in contact with, the temperature of the room, and you may also notice your body's position in the system of global capitalism. And the air continues to flow, becoming even more relaxed, even more aware. Now, in this relaxed state, we are ready to consider the revolution. As you breathe in and out, receive an invitation to the idea that revolution will look different for you if you are in a bourgeois nation enriched by global capitalism than it might for someone in a country impoverished by it. Returning always to breath and class conflict. When we think about revolution, we may imagine it as destructive or violent. We may conjure images of past revolutions that we think fell short, or make jokes about sending landlords and capitalists to violent ends. We may shy away from this image, whether because we are liberals rather than socialists, or because we were raised in liberal capitalist societies that maintain a hold on our thoughts, or perhaps out of compassion and love for our fellow human beings, whoever they may be. Whatever the reason, we may desire to avoid revolution, but simply agitate for reform within capitalist society while maintaining its comforts. But although revolution means a break with the old ways of doing things, it need not be fundamentally destructive, but instead an act of creation. It may be scary or painful, like bringing a new child into the world, but it is the birthing of a new way of life, rather than the gradual managing of decay and bargaining with entropy that liberal democracy has become. This is not to say that we cannot learn from our mistakes or come to an understanding of history. Simply that, in considering the revolution, we want our focus to be on the present and not our anxieties about the past. Do not judge yourself if you have doubts. Simply observe them and let them go. We may become anxious or depressed when we ruminate on the past and witness the destruction and pain that can seem to surround us. We can be upset by the wickedness of others and wonder how it is that human beings can have done so many awful things to each other or the planet. Conversely, we may rejoice at small changes that we have managed to win in the past through elections and trade unions in the struggle breath and class conflict remain, and where we want our focus to be. Breathing in, peace, and out. Each breath deepening your relaxation and your awareness. When we are not dwelling on the past, we often project our thoughts about revolution into the future, as if it will be some messianic event waiting just out of reach that will save us from the frightening things in our world. But the future also does not exist. It is only anticipation in the present moment. When we think of the revolution as a specific event, like an armed uprising that will take place in the future, we can become concerned about whether our actions take us closer to our idea of that event or farther away. We may become fixated on the purity of our vision, focusing only on the ideal, classless future, and neglecting other forms of oppression that others struggle against in the here and now. Or we may become anxious, thinking that it is an impossible task, or that we would have nothing to contribute, imagining instead that the future revolution will be led by anti-fascist catgirls or revolutionary daddies who will do the fighting for us. This can turn us against each other, or make us doubt ourselves, wondering whether what we or those around us are doing is truly revolutionary or merely reform. It is okay to have these doubts. Simply recognize them and return to the present moment, to breath, and the desire to abolish the class system. By noticing and letting go of doubts, and not judging ourselves or others for having them, we become prepared to take and wield power in the present, to neither retreat into ruminating on how we have been hurt in the past by the current political system, nor project our desire for change onto imaginary future heroes, but instead, in the present moment, to realize the energy inside of ourselves that we can use to lead the revolution now. Breathing in, presentness, and out. When we look at the revolution either as a distant project of the future or the redemption of the past, we often imagine it as a moral crusade, springing from the best impulses of our hearts, and someday bringing about a lasting justice. But this way of thinking can also bind us and stop us from seeing a way forward in the present. It is easy to become overwhelmed or disappointed when our own sense of justice is not met, and to become concerned with how the resources of our world are distributed, rather than the conditions under which they are extracted and produced. We stray from the present and class conflict, and it is easy to conflate our moral desire for a better world ideals of participation in bourgeois democracies in which we are raised. That is not to say that we must abandon our moral ideals or close our hearts to democratic participation or the suffering of others, or that our smaller efforts to make the world a better place are necessarily a misuse of our time. It is merely to appreciate that a revolution is more than a change in the distribution of goods, or a struggle to get a slightly fairer deal. It is the struggle to abolish the causes of that injustice, not merely its symptoms, which are fleeting and can flare up chaotically as long as class conflict persists. Breathing in, political revolution, and out, aware of your chest, your belly, that tingling sensation in your head, shoulders, chest, and down through your legs. You may become aware that you are holding tension in your neck, or your jaw, or cognitive tension brought about by trying to reconcile the internal contradictions of capitalism. With your next breath, just invite any tense muscles to let go. In a moment, we will count backwards from 5 and gradually return to our normal awareness. But first, take a moment to suspend yourself in this relaxed state, as if deep in an ocean, the waves sway overhead, but you are still and calm. And now we will begin to surface with 5 short phrases. You may wish to repeat them in your mind or out loud, whatever is best for you. Beginning with 5. I am aware of my breath. And now, 4. I am aware of my body, becoming more aware with each breath. 3. I am aware of class conflict. Breathing in and out with 2. I am aware of the revolutionary energy inside me. And now, finally, 1. I embrace revolution in the present moment. Fantastic job. If you wish, you can stay in this relaxed state for as long as you desire. Or you may wish to continue your day renewed with this energy. Just remember to allow your awareness to always return to breath and the present moment, and the desire to abolish the class system.
Roots, brought to you by DW. In this podcast series, we discover how individuals from across Africa shaped the continent. I'm Kai Nebe.
And I'm Layla Johnson Salami.
Layla, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Kai. What's up?
Layla, I've got a giant lined up for this episode of African Roots. Do you want to guess who it is?
I mean, I can try, but you know, we have several African giants. I am gonna need a hint.
Fine. If I told you that he's been called Africa's Che Guevara.
Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso. I'm correct,
Good.
right?
Good. Well done, yeah.
But you know, why has he been called Africa's Che Guevara?
Well, Layla, to the people of Burkina Faso, he's even more than that. But the comparison between, a Cuban revolutionary and Thomas Sankara makes sense in some ways. Both were revolutionaries with socialist leanings, both men were young, extremely charismatic, and their downfalls in pursuit of something better for their respective countries have galvanized millions of young people. Oh, and both of them had a thing for motorcycles.
Cycles are literally like my biggest phobia.
Well, not for Che Guevara, but let's stick with Thomas Sankara for now, and let's start from the beginning. Thomas Sankara was an army officer in what was then known as the Upper Volta in West Africa, when he took power of the country in a military coup in 1983. Many African countries were experiencing coups at this time. Often they were peaceful, so it was sort of the norm in a way. Now, Sankara took over a country heavily reliant on the colonial power France, and it was incompetently run, it was desperately poor, and even 20 years after independence, Sankara still wanted this revolution to free his country of the dependence on France, and really just to take pride in itself.
Cet esclave répondra seul de son malheur.
The slave, who deludes himself that his suspiciously condescending master will set him free, is responsible for his misfortune. Only the struggle liberates.
Seule la lutte libère.
So I guess one of the first things he did was to rename the Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso means land of the upright people.
Which is a powerful name indeed, I must say.
Yeah, right. I mean, but that's not where it stopped. I mean, Sankara wasn't someone for half measures. He took on corruption. He famously made all the ministers ditch their luxury Mercedes-Benzes for small, cheap Renault 5s, something that applied to him as well. His next changes were sweeping healthcare, education, and agriculture reforms. Women could now go to school even when pregnant. Farming received unprecedented investment within the country. Sankara rejected this paternalistic aid on principle from the West, and he promoted sort of a pride in the Burkinabe people, especially those in far-flung rural areas where the majority of Burkinabes lived. And another key thing was literacy programs were introduced, basically to try and get the rural communities up to speed, and clinics and hospitals were also opened. And I guess also a big thing, Layla, and I guess you'll also like this, is that this change he made regarding lifting the rights of women, that was a huge step for this country.
Yeah, no, I mean, it absolutely was. And honestly, I must say, this is why Thomas Sankara is one of my favorite people in African history. But I have always wondered, how he was able to do this, getting people in government to ditch their Benzes for cheaper Renaults. I mean, in today's Nigeria, I don't want to speak for the rest of Africa, but I can't imagine a situation where whoever's in power can get our people in government to ditch their fancy cars, for cheaper cars. So I've always wondered, how was he able to do this?
I mean, it's hard to say, but the thing with Sankara was that was really part of his persona. He was very charismatic and he was very humble. He was very much the exact opposite of the stereotypical political elite, and a lot of people loved him for that, and they really respected him for it. So I'll let Muspila Sankara, who was Burkina Faso's ambassador to Libya at the time, explain just what this Sankara effect was like.
Thomas était compris par les pauvres parce qu'il avait besoin
Thomas was understood by the poor, by those who were looking for justice and recognition. by those who, despite their poverty, had an identity and were proud of belonging to their community and to their nation. His main characteristic was that he used his integrity both to serve his country and his people.
L'intégrité n'avait de l'égard que pour son pays, son peuple.
But all of this, this charisma and this shift of focus was good for many people, at least from a spiritual and also kind of a pride point of view. But it also really irked the classes that had benefited a lot from the previous system. There were very many Burkinabe businessmen who didn't like Sankara. There were middle-class people who had earned money in the previous regime who then suddenly felt that they were being undermined, and also traditional authorities that had basically been stripped of their privileges either from the colonial regime or also in the post-colonial era. And Sankara really upset many of these norms.
I mean, he made the right moves, but typical, right? I mean, I'm not surprised that many of them couldn't stand his choices.
And the other issue for Sankara was that it wasn't just inside the country that he made enemies, also outside, and especially with France, the former colonial power. And, you know, over the course of his rule, Sankara became more and more isolated, especially after 4 years in power. Unfortunately, despite his reforms, poverty remained extreme. The committees that Sankara had set up to sort of govern rural areas started to attack them and acted more like militias than actually government. Tribunals he set up convicted hundreds of people, sometimes with no evidence. And just 4 years after he took power, Sankara was assassinated in a plot masterminded by his successor Blaise Compaoré with the tacit approval from France.
And what was Campbell's relationship to Sankara?
Well, it was complicated. When Sankara took power in a military coup earlier that decade, Compaoré was his right-hand man. They were best friends, allegedly. The thing is that Compaoré turned on Sankara, and Many Quarters was then held as responsible for his death. And Compaoré then took over Burkina Faso, and it became a dictatorship. He was the exact opposite of Sankara. His allies looted the state funds dry. And it was only in 2014, almost 30 years after taking power, when huge protest action in Burkina Faso forced him to really give up power, and he fled into exile in the Ivory Coast.
What, for his bad leadership?
Well, no, not actually. It was more to do with the allegations that he was one of the main people who had plotted Sankara's death.
You know, Kai, life is so deep. I mean, let's just backtrack for a second. We are talking about his supposed best friend. You know, when they say trust no one, right?
Well, definitely, and it was something, I guess, that when Sankara obviously did not see coming. He expected forces from outside of the country to attack him, but I don't think he expected his best friend to be doing that. Bruno Jaffrey, the leading scholar on Sankara, explains why many people hold Compaoré responsible, ultimately.
Donc simplement il est inculpé dans cet assassinat. Il est sous le coup d'une menace d'une demande d'extradition.
His involvement is obvious. The man who killed Sankara answered to the chief of security, Gilbert Diendere, and he was Blaise Compaoré's right-hand man during his whole presidency.
De Blaise Compaoré pendant tout le régime. Voilà un peu les ramifications, que les noms des membres du commando sont connus.
So, Compaoré has always denied these allegations that he was really behind them. I mean, even though he took power straight after Sankara's death. And the thing is, earlier in Compaoré's reign, Sankara was just, you know, another military figure, but his image has grown in recent years. And at a recent trial, Burkina Faso sentenced Blaise Compaoré to life imprisonment in absentia. And for supporters like Pierre Ouedraogo, president of the Thomas Sankara International Memorial Committee, the trial, I guess, was more symbolic than people knowing someone would be punished for it.
Nous ne pouvons pas ressusciter Thomas Sankara, mais nous voulons.
We cannot resurrect Thomas Sankara, but we want that in the future it should be part of Burkina's values that the people's weapons entrusted to the army should not be used to kill the people's leaders.
And Leila, I have to stress again, I mean, Blaise Compaoré ruled Burkina Faso for 27 years, and Sankara ruled for just 4 years. But Sankara's name carries so much weight across Africa that he's almost like the thing that people most, associate with Burkina Faso. And it really was that he gave the country a new identity, and it's almost that he became more famous in the afterlife than while he was a leader.
When we come back, we'll meet another iconic leader who led his country to independence, but not for long.
DW African Roots. Find new African Roots episodes on dw.com/African Roots, Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Kai, let's roll back the clock just a bit, about 20 years before Sankara. And you made me guess, so I'm gonna make you guess. Who am I talking about here?
20 years before Sankara. Okay, that's around the time of many African countries becoming independent. But come give me some geographical context.
Okay, let me be a bit more fair. We're talking about someone who was in the Belgian Congo at the time.
Okay, that narrows it down quite a lot. But I think I'm gonna go with Patrice Lumumba.
And
Is that? Am I right?
You are spot on. And like Sankara, Patrice Lumumba was hungry for independence from the West, and he was really vocal about it. Maybe a bit too vocal for some.
Ooh, okay. So is that sounding bad or what?
Yeah. I mean, his contempt for colonial masters, Belgium, was palpable.
Compelling the white man to respect, announcing in a clear, loud tones from this time on, this country no longer belongs to him. You made the brothers of your race lift up their heads to see clear, straight ahead, the happy future promised by deliverance.
So
I think I remember that. Is that a poem by Lumumba?
now that's a poem by Lumumba that came after Belgian colonial authorities had violently suppressed pro-independence protests in the capital, Leopoldville, which is today's Kinshasa. Lumumba was incensed and rallied against Belgium's colonial administration. And here we're back in January 1959. The fight for independence had started, and Patrice Lumumba had emerged as a leader of the anti-colonialist movement. He really did condemn the colonialists. Well, let me give some more context to this. Here's Kambai Boachia, a history professor and an authority on Lumumba's life.
Ce mouvement a eu un mentor.
This movement had a mentor, a man with a fiery temperament, open to the world, Lumumba, a dazzling man. A man who did not like injustice. A man who knew what alienation was, who had followed the development in Guinea, how the Guineans said no to the politics of the French community. And Lumumba took this path, and he went against Belgian colonial politics.
Il est allé contre la politique coloniale belge.
Okay, Leila, so he was against colonialism, but that's like, there was a lot of people that were against colonialism at that time. So what was Lumumba's background, and why was he so anti-Belgium?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Lumumba was a relatively well-educated man, right? And he had worked various jobs. Most Congolese were purposefully held back by the colonial administration. He was a postal worker, a sales director for a brewery, and also a press correspondent.
Wow, that's quite a crazy CV to have. I mean, he was pretty much a jack of all trades, would you say?
Yeah, he was essentially a jack of all trades. But by the age of 30, Lumumba had also become a leading pro-independence voice. He read extensively, Kai, of anti-colonial struggles across the African continent, and he became convinced that it was time to call for independence and a united Congo. Also, the Belgian colonial administration was considered notoriously brutal, so even among other colonial powers, with officers and colonists acting with impunity and thousands of Congolese effectively forced into slave labor, so it was extremely cruel.
Right. So Lumumba then was quite widely supported then with his calls for independence and also, just get the Belgians out of here.
I mean, it's tricky. He definitely was in some quarters. Remember, the Congo is a huge country, much bigger than all of Western Europe combined. And in the run-up to independence, the fledgling political class were deeply divided along ethnic lines. Many of them had developed cozy relationships with Belgian interests, and they kind of felt threatened by Lumumba's anti-tribalist vision for a united Congo. They were quite against this. And I must say, whose identity was predicated on its overthrow of colonialism.
Right. So I guess this must have definitely been a problem for the fight for independence as such. There was no was there like a unified front or what really?
I mean, it certainly was a problem, I must say. Colonial authorities, who until recently, by the way, hadn't planned for an independent Congolese state, they really didn't want to see a strong, united Congo, and they were quick to take advantage of these conflicts, these ethnic conflicts that were going on. Let's not forget, Kai, that we are also talking about pretty much the most resource-rich region on the African continent.
Well, and like the second biggest country in Africa. It's huge, like you said, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly, with a lot of forces pulling in all directions. But, still Lumumba, he did remain quite idealistic. He was a very charismatic guy, and his Congolese national movement widely won the nation's first general elections, and that was in May 1960. Now, as Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba had little time for appeasing the former colonizers. At an independence ceremony, Belgian King Baudouin referred to his grandfather, King Leopold, who oversaw the worst of Belgium's colonial cruelty, as a genius. Lumumba, of course, did not think so.
Hommage aux combattants de la liberté nationale.
Tribute to the fighters for national freedom. We have known disgrace, insults, and blows that we had to endure morning, noon, and evening because we were Negroes. Who will forget the shootings from which so many of our brothers perished, the cells into which those who refused to submit to a regime of injustice, oppression, and exploitation were brutally thrown?
Régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation.
So at this point, the Congolese who were present in the room applauded wildly, right? But for Baudouin and other Western dignitaries that were present, Lumumba's speech was an insult to them, and an insult that he would be punished for. Let's listen in to Professor Campbell again, who we heard from earlier.
Il a offensé le roi. Il a offensé la...
He offended the king. He offended Belgium. After the speech, he went into turmoil. The force publique responsible for public order became dysfunctional. There were no experienced high-ranking Congolese officials anywhere. Public service deteriorated. Security deteriorated. Lumumba did not have the legitimate tools to govern. He was alone. The Belgians and the imperialists completely disoriented the country. There was a terrible chaos.
Il y a eu un chaos terrible.
It really sounds like, Leila, that he was up against sort of a lot of external forces and that, everything that suddenly could go wrong did go wrong.
Yeah, that's essentially it. There was indeed a lot of chaos, and quickly is a key word. Everything that could go wrong went wrong so quickly, and the fledgling Congo fell apart. Also because Prime Minister Lumumba and his president, Joseph Kasavubu, they couldn't work together. Then the resource-rich provinces of South Kasai and also of Katanga seceded with Belgian support. And Lumumba also had quite an authoritarian streak to him. And he kind of dismissed those that didn't really agree with him. So his attempts to play on the Cold War rivalries when he sought, both Soviet and Western assistance, for example, to help his wilting states, kind of also placed him in a precarious position.
Wait, so the West was also kind of accusing him of collaborating with the communists or what?
Well, Western powers and secret services definitely used anti-communist sentiments to justify their actions in the Congo. which of course only led to more chaos, Kai. I mean, war broke out, the army mutinied. It was a disaster, and behind the scenes, former colonial powers sought to look after their interests, obviously without any concern for bringing peace to the Congo region.
I mean, Lelo, you're painting kind of a very chaotic picture of Congolese independence. I mean, how did it end?
Yeah, chaos is another key word. I mean, well, when Joseph Desiré Mobutu, who was then the chief of staff, seized power, he later arrested Lumumba, and Lumumba was assassinated with the support of Belgium and even the United States. That was in January 1961. So you know at the beginning, Kai, when I said this didn't really last for long for Lumumba, that's what I'm talking about. The speech he made was in 1960, and he was assassinated the following year.
Wow, it's just incredible to see, as you were describing this very fast way and this euphoria of independence suddenly disintegrating in chaos. But then what happened afterwards? Like, where does a fledgling country go then after that?
Lumumba's death did cause outrage, and the manner in which the Congolese state was allowed to collapse did shock the world. It seemed, though, that Lumumba kind of knew his fate before. In one of his last letters, he wrote that the nation will know that I offered myself as a hostage for its freedom. And that's quite profound.
Well, it is indeed. It also sounds like a man who really did have an idealistic vision that of a united country, but somehow was either never allowed to materialize or just could never materialize.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, where it's a bit of a shame. After Lumumba was killed, Mobutu became pretty much, the kind of stereotypical repressive and corrupt dictator. And that was before he was overthrown in 1997. And since then, as most people know, the modern Democratic Republic of Congo has never been a fully secure nation. It's never really fully recovered from this.
It's fascinating, kind of the parallels between who we were speaking about, Thomas Sankara, and now Patrice Lumumba, both of them in power for such a short time, and then being succeeded by dictators for, almost 3 decades. Their dreams or like their hopes for their countries and the way that they were both assassinated. Leila, do you think we could really call Sankara and Lumumba martyrs here, or what do you think?
I mean, that's one side of it. You know how, like I said, with Lumumba saying that the nation will know that I offered myself as a hostage for its freedom, we also know that Sankara, not too far off from his death, assassination rather, we also know that he said something like, even if you kill me, 1,000 more Thomas Sankaras will be born, But it's not just that, Kai. In death, they became legends, not necessarily for their political success, but more for their ideals of an egalitarian and free society.
That's where we will have to leave things for today. African Roots is a cooperation between Deutsche Welle and the Gerda Henkel Foundation. Special thanks to our producers Jürgen Kuhn, Shola Lawal, Philip Zantner, and of course our voiceover artists. I'm Kai Nebe.
And I'm Leila Johnson Salami.
Join us again next time, and bye for now.
Bye.
A year later, she was killed.
On behalf of all in this house, our thoughts are very much with Miss Campbell's family at this incredibly difficult time, and a very inspirational young woman.
Although she died a hero for many, her death left unanswered questions for her family.
She knew that her life was endangered. And I want to know that my daughter did not die for nothing.
Everybody's trying to figure out, how could a person from her background, her upbringing, her family make that decision?
Now her father is trying to make sense of his daughter's decision.
I want to experience what it was like for Anna.
When you arrive here, you learn to use Kalashnikov. A fighter is never divided from the weapon.
How was the world seen through her eyes? The more I know about her story, the more I would feel close to her. I feel a lot of guilt, a lot of grief. I obviously feel her loss all the time, every day. I'm never going to see my daughter again. I was looking forward to a future in which she would be a mature, more rounded, more experienced woman who would have lived through all her fire of youthful idealism and to come out the other side.
Hi. How's it going? Yeah, fine.
Everyone's going to feel guilt around death.
Having a picnic in Camden.
Oh, that's nice.
And obviously the situation in this case is going to make people feel guilty because they're always going to be like, oh, well, I could have prevented this. We're all dealing with it in our own ways. We've got each other and we're such a strong family. It's pretty special what we've got, so yeah.
Someone that's sailing somewhere.
How are you, Dad?
Not feeling fantastically kind of effusive.
I'm really trying hard to respect the decisions that she made. To say, I'm proud of your choices, and I'm proud of you. I'm not there.
It's taking it out of me.
I feel robbed. I feel like this could have been intercepted. Like, this could have been avoided.
It's a bit too noisy for me. I want to know what her world was like. It's what I think about a lot. I simply didn't know enough about what was going on for her.
Frogs in the pond!
Wow, show me.
Julian!
It began when she went to Sheffield, when she went to university. She fell in with a group of quite radical left-wing thinkers. I know that before she went to Sheffield, she hadn't developed a core direction. But after Sheffield, it began to emerge quite unmistakably.
She said she felt embarrassed telling people that she was an English student. There were bad things happening in the world and she wanted to be part of a change or a solution.
After a year at university, Anna left and dedicated herself to activist causes.
Anna decided to define herself by making some bold choices.
She believed in direct action and became increasingly involved in the anti-fascist movement movement and hunt saboteuring.
She decided to be on the fringe of society and question everything about society.
She thought that fascism was at the root of the success of capitalism, which kept people poor, disempowered, and was basically immoral. That was her belief. We used to have arguments about this. I respected her need to impact directly on the world. But I never thought that that was the right way of going about things.
She would say to me, Dad doesn't really understand. He thinks you just write a letter to your MP and something will be sorted, and he doesn't realise that people can't affect their difficult lives like that.
Anna, can I ask you a question? Why do you never do up your pyjama jacket?
Because I can't be bothered.
Oh, this is going to be a squash. When she was at school, she defended a bumblebee in the playground. Some kids were tormenting it, kicking it around, and she furiously came to the defense of this little insect against this group who would have all been turning their torment onto her. She just steadfastly refused to be affected by that. And she staunchly protected this little insect. And that was, I think, her soul's calling, was to protect something and nurture it until the last possible moment.
It makes me think of her mum.
I was just thinking about her mum.
About the inspection of licensed artist 1 a.m.
Mum was definitely an activist in her own way. She was like, so Rose, I'm staging this demo in Lewis, do you want to come? And I was like, okay Mum, what is it? She's like, right, we're all going to sit in the doorway of Boots, because they've got their whole offshore tax thing going on, and we're just going to sit there, and we're just going to drink tea, and we're not going to move, we're staging a sit-in. And then the next thing I know, she's been arrested. I think she was on the front page of, like, the Sussex Express or something, being handcuffed, and the headline was like, OAP gets arrested, which she found hilarious. She's like, I'm bloody 50 years old.
Anna had Adrienne's bravery and Adrienne's idealism and Adrienne's example. She went on demonstrations with her mother. So she regarded her mother as her model. Adrienne was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008. She was only 48. She had all the treatment, the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy. It appeared that there was no cancer in the lymph glands, so we thought everything was all right. But then in 2012, she found that she couldn't read because the letters all danced around on the page.
Anna's mother discovered the cancer had spread to her brain and could not be treated. She spent her last months at home.
My body is failing. My kidneys have virtually given up. My blood pressure's very high, and, I can feel my body closing down.
It is one of the most painful things I've ever had to go through in my life. Sorry, I'll just have a moment.
In November 2012, Adrienne died, leaving behind Dirk and their 4 children.
Anna kept her feelings to herself. She was a private person. She probably felt that she had to take on her mother's role as a kind of pioneer activist, which she might not have done to the same extent if her mother hadn't died. 2 days after Adrienne died, she said, Dad, come to the anarchist book fair. And there was a meeting going on about Rojava. I didn't actually know a lot about the ins and outs of the situation in the Middle East.
In 2012, as civil war swept through Syria, the Kurds in Rojava in the northeast of the country took control of their territories for the first time in 100 years. After generations of oppression, they seized the opportunity to establish an autonomous region. A radical new society based on the principles of cooperation and feminism.
The Kurds say they will not be silenced again. They're calling for autonomy in a democratic Syria.
But by 2013, they were under threat from IS, known in the region as Daesh.
She could have said to me, well, Dad, what it is the Kurds in northern Syria decided to roll out this inclusive socio-political experiment, which is going really well, but they're under attack from Daesh, and they really need our help. She never engaged me in that conversation, and I really wish she had, because I would love to have been that close to her and that involved in her decisions.
Like Anna, hundreds of people from around the world traveled to Syria to fight with the Kurds, and almost 50 have died in the past 4 years. But for Anna, it was the Kurds' belief in creating a different type of society that inspired her. She wanted to join what became known as the Rojava Revolution.
Hi, Jamie.
How you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah. Welcome to the Kurdish Community Centre in Haringey.
Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't been here for a few months, but I came, I think, last summer, and then I didn't see all the pictures on the walls. It was a bit like, too soon. I can't see all these faces again so soon.
Because it takes so much out of you, I imagine.
Yeah. Chaya Adesbas. My Kurdish is so terrible now.
In 2018, Jamie Jansen returned from fighting in Syria with a YPG. He was detained for taking part in foreign fighting and is still under investigation.
How did you first get interested in the Rojava situation? What drew you to it?
I've been doing a lot of activist work in the UK. I didn't feel like we made any progress. We dangle a few banners off buildings and nothing really changes. And I'd kind of kept Rojava in the back of my mind for a long time, but I'd always put off going there, partly because I didn't want to pick up a gun and try to hurt people. I was always a non-violent, direct activist, and just came to the conclusion that I needed to step across that line and join a real revolution to try and make a better place.
That's a big decision. You joined the militia of Rojava. It's called the YPG, right?
Yes, they knew they had to defend themselves by force. So the YPG is the People's Protection Unit that was set up for the men, and also the YPJ was set up to give women an equal role in the fighting.
Did you get involved in any fighting?
Yes, there was. We were sent to Raqqa for the last 5 weeks of the fight against ISIS. It felt very strange to be holding a gun and thinking I could actually have to kill someone with this at any moment. I was hesitating, thinking I'm actually going to fire at human beings. Am I going to do it? And then I did it. It's hard to even talk to you about it because I really feel like people suffer more at home not knowing what's going on. That's one of the things I feel worst about, that I had to lie to my family to betray their trust. They thought I was visiting a girl in Serbia, and then I rang up from the academy and said, sorry, Mum, this is going to upset you, but I'm in Syria. She was trying not to cry. She was very much like, I'm coming to get you. I'm like, Mum, I'm sorry. You just can't. This just for the first time in my life. You can't do anything for me right now. This is my decision, and it's shitty for you, but this is what I want to do as a man.
My conscious choice with my children was to encourage them and accept them in whatever they chose to be or to do. Because I can remember with my own parents, and particularly my mother, that her expectations of me were quite difficult to match up to. I think she thought that she was doing me a service by giving me the message that basically I wasn't good enough. She always placed goals in front of me that I had to achieve. I grew up thinking that I would never amount to anything. My mother would say to me things like, When you performed, I was so embarrassed I felt sick. That went right in. So I didn't want to do that to my children, because I'd carry all my own baggage from the parenting that I had. I always encouraged them in the way that their characters were emerging, and just allow them to feel safe in the family.
Anna, what are you doing?
Her mother was worried about her being bookish. I said, it's fine. She wants to go and read books all day. What's the problem? That's who she wants to be. But if you tell her she shouldn't be doing it, then it's going to cause her a problem. That's how we brought them up. We trusted them. And I trusted Anna. I've always trusted her.
This is Mrs. Rabbit. This is Mrs. Duck. She's obviously a duck.
How many are there?
That's all. 30. This is Mrs. Fox, and the reason why she's holding a flag is they're going to have a Barbie war. They're always having wars against the Barbie.
What, even the women fight?
Sadly, the women do usually fight.
In May 2017, Anna had an announcement to make.
She just said to me, Dad, you know, I'm going to Rojava. I didn't question her about it, because I knew from experience that if I did, unless it was wholly supportive, it would be seen as an attempt by me to undermine her decisions. I said, I accept what you have decided, but you may be killed. And she said, Dad, there's nothing I can do to reassure you. And I understand that you're worried and alarmed, but this is more important to me than that. All I could say was, well, it's been nice knowing you. Because there was no conversation. Mentally, I had to let go of her.
7 months after Anna's death, Dirk has decided to make the trip to Rojava.
I want to experience what it was like for Anna. I would have preferred to have participated in her life. I'd love to have insight into her reality. How was the world seen through her eyes? The more I know about her, the more I would feel close to her.
Dirk is following in Anna's footsteps, flying to Iraq and traveling across land to the Tigris River that borders Syria.
It's amazing to be traveling through this extraordinary landscape. Anna had to cross the Tigris secretly. She had to cross at night.
By joining a foreign militia, Anna ran the risk of being prosecuted as a terrorist upon her return to the UK. The journey was dangerous. She crossed the border in a small boat with other internationals.
International volunteers usually bring far too much stuff. Particularly American volunteers will turn up with all sorts of stuff that they try and get through customs, kind of telescopic sights, and thermal scopes, and body armor and whatnot. The European ones find it harder to get a hold of military kit, so we just turn up with unnecessary camping gear. Whereas the Kurdish fighters are running around with a kind of piece of naan and a grenade, very fast guerrilla fighters.
When Anna arrived in Rojava, she was placed in a YPJ commune to learn Kurdish and begin her training. Whilst there, she was filmed by a documentary maker. This is the first time this footage has been seen.
I suppose, maybe I'll say a bit about why I decided to come here. I never thought that I could be someone who could participate in the revolution here. I want to know that it's real. As anarchists, we're always told, oh, you're just idealists, you're naive, that could never happen, that could never work. Yeah, I feel like this is really important and amazing, and I'm going to learn a lot, and I don't regret it for a second.
Around 36 million Kurds live in the Middle East, across Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. They share a language, but have never had their own state. Syria's 2.5 million Kurds faced brutal oppression under the Assad regime. Even their language was banned, and their leaders imprisoned.
I'm trying to learn as much as I can, find out what life is like for the locals, just get a sense of this whole place, the dynamics going on here.
The lives of the Kurds in Syria today have been transformed. But in 2014, they faced a monumental battle for survival when IS threatened a city in the heart of Rojava.
The Syrian border town of Kobani has become engulfed in the fiercest fighting yet between Kurdish forces and the so-called Islamic State jihadists who are trying to seize it.
The fighting raged all day, plenty of explosions as the IS guns target the center of Kobani.
The fighting focused on Kobani, near the border with Turkey. During a 3-month siege, the population of 45,000 fled, leaving the YPG and YPJ to face IS.
They're very trusting, the owners of these vehicles. It's like the whole thing could come falling down on top of them any time. This devastation is horrendous. We haven't seen anything like this in our country since the Second World War.
بالبحر دست بگیرد کوبانی جدید و دریافی ملی زرا یارش تکرد جبونا سینور بگیرن سلبی اساسی اسم کوبانی طیبت باجاری کرماج ورا یعنی چه کوبانی کردن تو باز کوبانی تانی کرماج تنایی کن وقت رام کرد ندی ولی داری مال زورلمه دبون ردو تقلا ملی ترکیه دکره دپاراستن.
The fight for Kobani is far from over.
Officially, Turkey was an ally of America in the fight against IS. But now the Kurds accuse the Turks of helping the jihadists.
As the fighting continues, Turkey looks on.
They claimed that Turkey wanted to destroy Rojava, something that Turkey denied.
These Turkish tanks have been in position for about a week now. Kurds are infuriated that while Kobani suffers, they've remained still.
We don't need their weapons. We don't need their support. They just stop supporting ISIS.
عسكري تكفي داريبو وقت دوا زورلمه دبو فدربو سويوري دربو سويوري تكفي عسكري تكفي دفورس فرشي تموت وهم جيري شبكن شوفا بريد لهم أو جيري شمال.
Turkey has had a long-running internal conflict with its own Kurdish population. Many of the 14 million Kurds in Turkey support the idea of a Kurdish state, but their efforts towards independence have been brutally repressed by the government.
A potent sign of looming defeat, a large Islamic State flag flying where yesterday there was only fighting. The city's defenders, filmed here by their own cameras, say they relish the challenge of taking on the militants in their own streets. But in recent days, the fighting has seemed more and more desperate. The video put out by the attackers shows IS fighters advancing to a hill overlooking Kobani.
After 3 months, the British and the Americans declared their support for the Kurds, and airstrikes began to turn the tide against IS.
Airstrikes, not the first, but by far the most concentrated. Again and again throughout the day, coalition warplanes hit jihadi targets.
IS was defeated in Kobani, but the city was reduced to rubble by the airstrikes, and 1,000 Kurdish fighters lost their lives in the battle.
When you see the reality of this huge area of graves, it's like the First World War. There are so many people you can't take it in. Some of them that I've seen were as young as 16, even 15. The Kobane fight was hugely significant because it showed to the world and to the Turks that it couldn't be defeated that easily. These people are so hospitable, so friendly. They don't need a reason to offer you a sweet when they pass you in the graveyard. They're very open-hearted. That's how we brought our kids up. To be connected, to be generous. So she would have been among her own kind here, no doubt about that.
We've lost one person, they're losing family members all the time. It's not just us which are experiencing this loss. You know, we can't even imagine what they're experiencing. They're losing everything they have, you know? We've still got all this, and we've got each other. So.
The Kurdish struggle in Kobani reignited a decades-long campaign for Kurdish independence in Turkey.
The moment bombs go off outside a football stadium in Istanbul, killing 38 people, Kurdish militants say they were responsible.
The most prominent Kurdish armed separatist group in Turkey is the PKK, a classified terrorist organization in the West.
Once again, terror has hit Turkey.
The internal conflict has led to tens of thousands of deaths on both sides. After Kobani, the PKK unleashed a series of bombings, killing scores of civilians.
As the bombs hit, a local TV channel was on air.
Turkey sees little difference between the PKK and the YPG in Syria. It believes the link between them means the YPG also poses a threat to their national security. Britain has a different view.
The United Kingdom recognises some similarities in terms of ideology between PKK and YPG, but not the direct link that is claimed by Turkey, which is why we prescribe PKK but not YPG.
In 2015, the Turkish president declared he would take action against the PKK and the YPG.
The government has vowed revenge. My country and my people can rest assured, said President Erdogan, we will fight the scourge of terrorism to the end.
Anna arrived in Syria 2 years after the battle for Kobani. The YPG and YPJ were still rebuilding their militia and had opened a training academy for international fighters where Anna was posted.
We're on our way to the Internationalists Academy of the YPJ, which is where the young women from foreign countries receive their initial training. Anna spent a lot of time there. It's quite a wrench to see these young women dressed in military fatigues. With their Kalashnikovs, they all look like versions of Anna.
Anna's friend Rojbin is still living in the academy where Anna trained.
What is this place?
This is the International CPG Academy, and this is where women come and have an education. When Eileen was here, we were having education sitting around this stove.
This is the shared space that everybody uses. Right.
And this is...
this is sleeping room?
Yeah, sleeping room, but in the day it's a room where they study, we sit. In this room, there is 7 people now.
Do you have private space? No private space?
Friends that came in this education are mostly used to live communal. Yeah, because they have to be always ready. When you arrive here, you learn to use Kalashnikov. If you are a revolutionary, you cannot think that somebody else will fight for you. Some friends, they were really scared about the idea, but a fighter is never divided from the weapon.
A month after Anna arrived, the battle against IS intensified and international volunteers were being sent to the front line.
In Syria, US-backed Kurdish forces are now thought to have gained control of nearly half the city of Raqqa, the last remaining stronghold of so-called Islamic State.
Attacks were launched by the YPG and the YPJ. As a strategic partner of the US and Britain, the Kurds were supported by airstrikes while they fought on the ground.
Suddenly, they just said, "Who wants to go to Raqqa?" We're like, "Oh shit, that's the war. Okay, let's do it." And a group of us were just driven straight in on the back of a pickup truck with our guns, waving at all these children, feeling like, yeah, we're the business, we're hardcore. This is life and death. This is not buggering around getting annoyed that the tube's late. This is what being alive is really like.
Anna had only completed a month's training, so wasn't allowed to join the fighting in Raqqa. How do you imagine the enemy?
Being here, it doesn't really seem real, but they exist. So I have no conception of what it's actually going to be like if we do end up facing them. Maybe it will be different after my training, but I think I would probably be pretty useless because I've never had that experience or training. That's an interesting question.
The international volunteers, there was two main groups. There was the kind of ex-army people who just wanted to fight ISIS. And then there was the other people like me and Anna who were there because of what they'd heard about this revolution and wanted to fight for a left-wing cause.
Alongside the military training, Anna engaged in discussions of ideology and politics. She was given a new Kurdish name, Alishare Qerechok.
Can you tell me what the education consists of?
Then you have history of Kurdistan, history of Middle East, history of women, to be able to understand what they will fight for. The enemy is everywhere. Like, we also try to make people see.
But what is the enemy?
The enemy is capitalism, the enemy is patriarchy, the enemy is power, the enemy is this mindset that you have, that you want to own other people.
So what is the aim of the education? What do you hope to achieve?
Aim is to build revolutionary personality that can lead a change of the society. You cannot create a marginal, small utopia paradise for yourself and say that you are revolutionary. If the people are against you, doesn't accept you, doesn't understand you, what are you fighting for?
I think it's why Anna loved being here, because the new movement was creating the ideal society, which was involving everybody.
For me, Aline is a revolutionary personality. She couldn't accept another life than a free life. She was saying, I don't want to be shaped, but I'm ready to. Why? Because shaped is somebody who is revolutionary until the last second of their life. She really wanted to be one of these persons that will protect. If they were attacking here, she would have protected here.
Despite the risk of being arrested if they return to their own countries, hundreds of international volunteers have made their way to Syria to join the militia over the past 4 years.
Sorry, your name?
Avesta.
Avesta?
Yes.
Is that a Kurdish name?
Yeah. It's also a name of a shahid.
Most of the names we take are from shaheeds. To carry on their name is also good, carrying on their struggle.
Yeah. Meeting the YPJ internationals was a powerful experience. Their commitment came through absolutely strongly. They all have names of martyrs who have died in the course of the Rojava Revolution, which feels a bit morbid. There's too much emphasis on these martyrs. But if you look at it from the other perspective, what it does is it keeps the seriousness of the whole project, that they are going to face death.
Alishare arrived from Germany 4 months ago.
In the beginning, I wanted to come here more like to understand, to learn. But of course, I came here to fight. It is so hard to understand, especially for parents. I want my parents actually to understand. Like they say, for example, yeah, it's good that you do this, but don't go to war, don't fight. they still make a difference between me and other people. Like some
I don't think you
things.
could expect them not to say that.
Yeah, of course.
They love you, they don't want you to be in danger.
I'm ready for this as so many people are. Like, it's not just fighting, it's like building up a really, really beautiful world of hope, of freedom.
There is a part of my mind which would like to say to them, have you really thought about what would happen when you got killed? How it would affect your family? But I haven't had the courage, actually.
These are the stuff that she left. Is that her own notebooks?
Yeah, these are notes that she made during the education talks. Oh, this is so small. I need a microscope to read this. In the Middle East, religion killed the freedom of the individual. Quite a lot of this is the ideas of the revolution. We have some photos. This is the whole family when Anna was really quite small. Silly smiles. That's Anna. That's Rose doing a funny face. Anna was born prematurely, 6 weeks premature. She was in an incubator being fed breast milk through the nose. She looked like a little bird. So she was quite slow to develop physically. In fact, I was concerned about it, so I took her on forced marches to try and strengthen her legs up, which she protested at quite vehemently. I explained to her, it's for your own good. You've got to strengthen your legs and get strong. Eventually, she was in such anguish that instead of doing what any normal child would do, and kind of screaming and ranting or biting me, she bit her own knuckles. As she grew older, she didn't really express her feelings anymore. I think they were too powerful, and she got the message, at least from me, that powerful feelings were in some way unacceptable, or the expression of them was unacceptable. Is this everything? You said there was a notebook that you were... You said there was one particular notebook.
Anna wrote a diary of her time in Syria, which was kept safe to give to her family.
June. Now everyone is sleeping and the house is very calm. With endless cans of Pepsi and AK-47s lining the rooms. It seems so real here, but I expected it to feel a bit intangible. But of course I'm here. How could I be anywhere else? Eva gave me a new name. It was the name of a friend who was martyred. She said that it was a big responsibility to be named after a martyr, and Eva said, I'm big, so I can carry it. Part of me is terrified that I'll never go back. I suppose I don't have to decide now. I can wait until my year is up, then figure it out. I think I have a lot of introspection and reading to do before I become a fighter.
It starts from a month after she arrived in Rojava and goes all the way through till just before she was killed. Now that I've started reading it, seen her handwriting on the page, the lovely thing for me is that we're having a conversation, although it's just a one-way conversation, but I'm listening to her talk in a way that she didn't feel she could talk to me.
She was so happy. She was like content, and she was where she wanted to be. She was learning. She was meeting all these amazing people. She was doing something. She was really doing something.
It looked like she was in this circle of women that were enriching her life. This was part of her life journey and her life story. And she also sent us photos of the friends that she was making. And then whenever we spoke, it was always very relaxed. Always in the back of my head thinking, okay, when is this going to get dangerous?
August. We're finally in military education. 2 women came and showed us how to take apart the AK-47. I was nervous that I would cock it up, but at least I remembered to take the ammunition out first, which a couple of students forgot to a chorus of tutting. One by one, the students took a turn firing at a stack of rocks. When it was my turn, I walked over and took a deep breath and fired 2 shots. Sounds of appreciation erupted behind me. It turned out I'd hit the 60-meter target both times. I was pretty chuffed with myself, and in the minibus on the way back, Mara said that I should become a sniper. I could easily stay here and help with the building up and the movement of the academy. But my aim is to fight, and I will do so.
Dirk, if you'd known that she wanted to go to the front line, what would you have said?
I would have said, I'm really devastated to hear that you're going to fight, and I'm desperately worried, and please don't do it. And I think that's what she knew I would have said, which is why she didn't tell me.
By the end of 2017, the fight for Raqqa was over. But for the Syrian Kurds, this was not the end of the war.
I remember commanders saying, we know Turkey's going to invade at some point. They're not going to tolerate the Rojava revolution continuing. They're going to come for us, but they didn't think it was going to be yet. At that point, the whole focus was on defeating ISIS.
Türk Silahlı Kuvvetlerimiz en kısa sürede Afrin ve Münbis meselesini Allah'ın izniyle halledecek. Bize düşen de bu terör ordusunu daha doğmadan boğmaktır.
Turkish troops have crossed the border into northern Syria in a significant escalation of their battle against a Kurdish militia. The Kurdish YPG militia is backed by the United States, but viewed by Turkey as a terrorist organization.
From the air, Turkish F-16s struck yesterday. Their target, the Syrian Kurdish militia known as the YPG. And it wants them pushed back from the border town of Afrin.
In January, we were in the Deir ez-Zor region. Suddenly, we were all just told to pull out one day and go back to our main base. And then we were told that Turkey had invaded Afrin. They sat down with us and asked who wants to go and defend Afrin and who wants to go back to fighting against ISIS. And that was the point where I thought, who's the main threat now? And it was Turkey.
Turkey has air power and artillery on its side, and it's pounding the Kurdish positions.
We knew when we came back to our countries that no one's going to be particularly upset that we've been off fighting ISIS, but Turkey's a whole different matter.
Turkish jets are pounding the target at a checkpoint.
أصعب شيء عندما نرى الأطفال إيش ذنبه يعني ما هو ذنبه.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House unequivocally condemn Turkey for their disgraceful assault on Afrin. If the Foreign Secretary is unable to join me in condemning Turkey today, will the Minister of State at least explain why he believes, and I quote, Turkey's legitimate interest in securing its own border gives them the right to brutally attack the innocent Kurdish community in Afrin?
I don't think it's exactly as the Right Honourable Lady says. I think that we need to recognise Turkey's legitimate interests. Of course, we condemn any kind of attacks on civilians, and we wish to see a de-escalation of this, but the legitimate rights of Turkey, I believe, should be recognised.
January. Today is the 8th day of Turkey's attempted war on Afrin. Friends are always saying Afrin will be like Kobani, which I find a bit scary, since so many of our friends died there. On the news it said internationalists had arrived in Afrin, and I felt jealous. I want to go so much. If I'm honest with myself, for selfish reasons as well as altruistic. I want to be a part of the fighting. I want to feel my own strength to defend myself and my friends. I watch and read all the news every day, see the martyrs' photos and the funerals. Maybe that's why I want to go to Afrin so much, so I can feel closer to the struggle.
The decision to send Anna to Afrin was made by the senior commanders of the YPJ.
مرحبا.
You are Nasreen?
Yes, چای.
Basha.
ماشي. أنا بشرود.
You knew Anna, my daughter. What was your relationship?
شو وقتي دست بقى على الرجاوات كلنا. راستي ديتنا كذا. هيلين جمرة قرب على الكيشات. هندر ده من حسكر. بصادق من جرقت. قلت هيلين أستحسنت كردي.
When did Anna first talk to you about fighting?
أختي دست بقى على الخاص. بس ما ندخل أمسو بشي راستي. شو خا يعني قانوني مهنا قرالي مهنا. يعني حتى بهاورتينا بينه. وبتهيبة جبوها فالي انترناسيونال. بتهيبة الشن مسوسونا عشينا يعني.
So what changed that you allowed Haylene to go and fight?
شارع عفرين دست بكر هيلين دست بكر يعني براستي هيلين ضغطك يوصل صار ماشي كش ما مناش نعرف أزور بوم هيلين هرو مرة تلفونات كر شو ما تمناشي شو ما بتناقشين كنت هيلين وكنتنا الري أم تشين حمر دولتنا يعني يا رجيمنا هنا أم كرد هوري مرشها جابي مرشها هيلين شو فرا خرجتو هيلين مرة فوت رافشة حتى من قوت باشا بس كان جيب سفري مختلف شو بس تبخرب شو قد تصير روحات يا زي بجمع بسفري جبونا هنا من نادي.
Nasreen said she did everything in her power to dissuade Anna. So it was quite clear that her strength of purpose was too strong even for one of the top commanders of the YPG to do anything about it. She was desperate to be of some practical use and to measure herself against her comrades.
Do you feel that will make your breathing easier in some way, knowing that she really was so determined?
Yeah, I have to accept, we all have to accept that it was her choice, very much her choice. There was no doubt in her mind that she wanted to be the person she became.
You really have to send us to Afrin after this.
An exodus, the seemingly endless stream of civilians leaving Afrin.
I'm going to play a short song about Anna Campbell before I end the live stream.
To be out fighting in a war, too bold to turn the other cheek and pretend to ignore the difference she could make to the cause. When she left her life behind, she knew what she did it for. Anna was her name. Too smart to believe the lies they like to tell. Too caring and compassionate those thugs raise hell. She saw the revolution for what it was. They held her back, she dyed her hair and said, I don't think so, boss. And Anna was her name. And on that day, as the Turkish planes rolled in, we lost an angel and a friend. And that's where her body still lies, despite everyone's cries. She is cold and alone. So bring Anna home. Bring Anna home. Bring Anna home. Bring Anna home. Too kind to be out fighting in a war. Too bold to turn the other cheek and pretend to ignore the difference she could make to the cause. She left her life behind, she knew what she did it for. And Anna was her name. He stepped onto that aeroplane after spending 6 long months at war. He touched down and got put in change. You think that they don't want him here no more. He was treated like a hero overseas, the one who answered to the call and joined the YPG. They're gonna throw him in a courtroom and tell the world that he's a bad, bad man for saving thousands from certain doom and chasing ISIS out of Kurdistan when the whole world chose to look the other way. When Raqqa was enslaved by the Islamic State, he fought against their fascist caliphate. And now his prison cell awaits. They left him with no bank account, no passport, no chance of finding work. They're trying to send a message out. For 2 years they've dragged his name through the dirt. They did all they could to bring him to his knees. The one who answered to the call and joined the YPG. They're gonna throw him in a courtroom and tell the world that he's a bad, bad man for saving thousands from certain doom chasing ISIS out of Kurdistan, when the whole world chose to look the other way. When Raqqa was enslaved by the Islamic State, he fought against their fascist caliphate. And now his prison cell awaits. And so I must ask the government, tell me which side